We're delighted to spend time with you this morning and this afternoon. Transition from high school to work. How did it all begin? A number of years ago, when I was working in Campbell River, we were finding that a lot of the students who were leaving high school were having individual programs within the different high schools in Campbell River where we were teaching. But there didn't seem to be a really solid approach to preparing them for the possible job placements that they might have. And the work experiences that were that had been vibrant when one of our teachers took it in underhand seemed to float and only work when a certain teacher or a certain administrator was in the forefront of pushing this. So Ian Grant, who is a special needs teacher, and myself, I was an integration support teacher at the time, decided that we needed to solidify the approach because we needed all the students who had any special needs, including autism spectrum disorder, to be able to have a solid course that allowed them to explore what they might want to do as they transitioned out of high school. At that point, we approached the director of student services and asked him if we could have somebody from the work experience field in the school district come and work with us and be allocated specifically to the special needs population. We wanted them to get to know our students. We wanted them to participate in the classes which we had started to offer on a regular basis up at the school board office. And we lobbied very hard to get Vicki to be part of our team. And we began a partnership that has been going on for, a good 12 years now. What we did was Ian and I would hold a class at the school board office, and the reason we did that was so that we could have the students from the different high schools begin to learn how to get from one place to another independently as if they were going to a job site. So they would catch the bus, they had to figure out the schedule, they had to make sure they had bus passes, they learned how to greet people, they began to become very comfortable with the process of getting from the school to the workplace where they were expected to come dressed appropriately and have all of their equipment with them at the same time. We developed lesson plans which we felt paralleled the skill development that we wanted to see take place with these students. And Vicki worked hand in hand with us because as the career facilitator, she was the one who would go out into the field with these students and be able to come back to us and say, in your next class, I think that you need to cover this aspect of employment and employability. And so that's how the whole thing began. So the major goals of special education, like that of regular education, should be to prepare the student for life after graduation, an adult life with optimal opportunities for free choices, self-determination, and integration. Charlie Hart is the father of a son with autism spectrum disorder who has kindly given us permission to use this statement. He has had an influence in my training and in my outlook on what we need to do in this field. One of the individuals who has been through our program is Miles, and his parents have given us permission to tell stories about him and to share with other parents the vision that they had for Miles. He began school in preschool in an integrated setting. He went to the local elementary school. He learned how to take the ferry because he lived on an island with his peers, and he learned to do that independently. And he went to middle school in Campbell River, and then he also went to high school in Campbell River. His parents had a vision that he would become an integral part of his community and be as independent as possible. And they knew that it would take a wide team to be able to help them get through that. And with their trust and their insights and their support, Miles is now living independently, and he has jobs that he does, and he is able to be quite mobile in his community. As we went through the process with Miles, we realized that he was teaching us as much as we were teaching him. Because as much as we might feel that we know what every student needs and have a specific curriculum, you also have to have some flexibility in that curriculum, because things will come up almost every class that says, whoa, this isn't written anywhere. And so we have to think about it, and we have to determine what skills these students need to learn and how important it is for them to be able to keep jobs in the community.
Actually, before Catherine goes on, the reason we are here today is because of those students. They have taught us what we need to teach. So actually, we've been the learners through this whole process.
Symbiotic relationship. I think this pretty well speaks for itself. And it does take a village to raise a child. Parents can't do it on their own. Teachers can't do it on their own. And social services can't do it on their own. We all have to work together, and we all look at the child with different eyes. We see them as a teacher, we see them as a parent, we see them as a future employer. And so with everybody working together as a team, we get a broader perspective of what we can do to help kids transition effectively.
When we have children, and our parents were the same with us, they had dreams for their kids of what was going to happen, what their life was going to look like, what they were going to do when they left high school, etc. During the years that I was a learning assistance teacher, I spent many an hour in an IEP meeting with parents, and dreams was not a word that they talked about. What they talked about were the nightmares. The nightmares were something that just came out loud with life, actually. They said, there's no way, I just can't see what's going to happen for my young person. But what we did through our work experience program, through developing portfolios with students, was we were able to show them that they as well can have dreams for their students. And a classic example is one day I placed a young man at Save On Foods. And I have to get permission from the parents to place all of our students in different places. And the mother said, Vicki, she says, why are you placing JL at Save On? He will never be able to learn all the codes of all the vegetables, etc. And I said, well, why would he have to learn all the codes? And she said, well, you have to learn that if you're going to get a job at Save On. I said, what kind of a job do you think JL could do at Save On? She said, well, he could do the bagging of the groceries. I said, yes, he sure can. And he doesn't need to learn the codes. She said, you're kidding. I said, no. She said, Vicki, you have made my day. Suddenly now she had a dream. She saw potential for an opportunity for her son.
So together we help realize dreams. The home, working with the school, and knowing your community really well will begin to give you some insights into the types of work that your son or daughter or your student may be able to participate in, either fully or on a just a partial participation basis. But you know, when you look even around you, when you came to this venue this morning, I'm always struck by the fact that there are people catching buses, there are people walking, there are people going into Starbucks. They all have a purpose. They all have places to go, people to meet, and things to do, because they are a part of the working world. And I think that's why we are here and why we're so committed to ensuring that all students have that opportunity, because when you have that connection, then you have the chance to blossom and be part of your society, not left on the fringes. A child's parent or guardian remains the most powerful and consistent advocate for their child, and that will never change. This is a picture of Clara Claiborne Park and her daughter Jessie. Clara was a mother who refused to believe that autism was a result of refrigerator mother syndrome. So she wrote the book, The Siege, the first 8 years of an autistic child, which was the first book I ever read and has profoundly influenced me. She has become recognized around the world for the work she did with Jessie, and I really recommend that it's worth reading this. She followed up with this, Exiting Nirvana, as Jessie got into her late 40s. And because Jessie had learned how to communicate, she was able to describe some of the things that had happened to her as she was growing up. She had the ability to speak to her mother and answer some of her questions. So again, great insights about how, with patience, persistence, with assessments and team building and teamwork, that you begin to know the strengths and the challenges that your child or your student encounters or houses. And it gives you the ability to develop a vision of what you would like to see as that child progresses through their life. The family is the primary influence and educator in the development of a child's attitudes, standards, and values. The way that we even think about work, the way that we talk about work, the way that we engage in the jobs that we do will have an effect on those who are around us. It's very easy to say, oh, I don't like my job, or I find it very frustrating, and that's true, but we should be consciously thinking about all the positives of the work world and start to make sure that we think out loud about some of the things that we really enjoy about our jobs and how important they are. I was downtown the other day and one of our graduates was working downtown, and I could hear him sort of muttering. And I walked up to him and I said, Graham, thank you so much for helping keep our city so beautiful. And all of a sudden he just stood up and he says, you're welcome, Mrs. Smith. Happy to do it. And it's a part of the attitude that we have and we project and we share will influence the way our children respond. The family has a big role in this part of the process. Not only are our attitudes going to influence whether our students, our children are going to engage in work effectively, but we are the ones who know, you are the ones who know your children best. You know what their interests are, you know what their strengths are. You also know the things that they don't like to do, which is just as important as what they do like to do. Because if we want to set them up for success, we want to make sure that we encourage the strengths that they have. We also want to look at some of the weaknesses, because if they are missing certain skills that they need in order to be successful, then we're going to have to work with our team to be able to increase those skills so that they can participate more fully. You also have the role of looking for opportunities in your environment. What are some of the things that your son or daughter can participate in, either as a bystander or just going, so that they can get used to that transition and generalized skills beyond the house and beyond the school? Can they be a greeter at church? Can they be a person who hands out tags or identification numbers at a sports event? Take a look around and see what opportunities are in your neighborhood or in your community so that you can gradually expand the field and the area that your son or daughter can participate in. Also look at what connections you have, because by introducing your sons or daughters or your students to people that you can trust and you know will give them opportunities to be involved in an activity, then you're just helping to set the stage for them to be able to move further afield into the world of work. Establish routines. It's really important that students have certain routines, or sons and daughters, because as they become responsible, then it becomes more automatic. Things like making your bed, taking out the garbage, may seem very mundane and matter of fact to most of us, but in fact you're establishing a work ethic and you're giving them the skills to be able to do it. Time management, responsibility, all the motor skills that might be involved in order to accomplish this. And provide balance, because I did a little quick calculation the other day, and I figured that even with working 40 hours a week on average, that's still only 21% of your life. So it's really important that we give our students and our children the balance that they will need to be able to fill their days. And also, that balance includes increasing social skills and social mobility within the community, because when you're at work, what do you talk about at coffee break? What you did on the weekend. And as easy as we think that might be, as easy as we think, like, we could go into a coffee room and talk about a TV show that was on last night. When I first started teaching high school students in the course, we decided, oh sure, we'll make sure that they all have coffee room chat. And we put them together, said grab a partner, and just tell each other what you did on the weekend. Dead silence. Dead silence. Nobody knew how to have a conversation. Again, the students taught us that we needed to teach them how to have conversations with each other. So that was on the agenda for the next 2 months. Once or twice a week, for 2 months, we would allocate 15 minutes where they would find a partner and they would actually discuss what they had done on the weekend. So again, teaching conversation skills, taking kids to events and participating in events in the community or family events are really important, and being able to talk about it and share it in whatever way that is, because we know that some students communicate verbally and other students communicate by using other means. Track the journey. It's really important, and Miles taught us this as well. When his mom and I were sitting in the car one day on the ferry going to Campbell River, I asked her the question, what do you think Miles wants to do when he graduates? Because he was in grade 10 at this point. And she says, honestly, Catherine, every time I ask him that question, he says, I don't know, which is not terribly unusual for a student in grade 10. But what we determined was that because he lives in the moment, he couldn't make that leap into his past to be able to sift through the events that he had been involved in and be able to say, I really want to build like my dad, or I really want to work on a farm because I really like horses. So we thought about it, and we thought, what about if we started to take more photographs of him involved in the activities that he really likes, as well as the activities he doesn't like, because remember, knowing what you don't like is just as important as knowing what you do like. And we made little booklets of his experiences. So the next time his mom went into the conversation and said to him, Miles, which one of these experiences or which one of these jobs did you like best? And why? He was able to look at his visual reference and be able to say, I really liked working at Staples because, or I really liked working at another place because. It gives them a foundation on which to reflect, which is really important. You're also, as I've mentioned, the individuals, whether you're at school or whether you're working with these students after school or whether they're your own children, who really understand what their strengths are. And you start detecting that from the time they're walking and moving and looking and engaging in different activities. I have a friend whose son, when he was 3 years old, we started working with him, and I asked her then, I said, could you please start to document the things that your son really likes to do, and always be conscious of that throughout his life, because you're the one who's going to be there to help him decide what might be the best path for him to take later on. You're the ones who really understand what their interests are. You also understand the challenges. You know what their social skills are, where they're really, really shining, and what we might need to do to enhance those social skills so that it becomes easier to leave school. That's another thing, you know, when you think about it, transitioning into another venue or arena is very difficult. So the more mobile that you make your students or children, the better the ability to be able to leave high school. Also, work habits. Really, really important to be on top of what are the work habits like. And yes, challenge them to be able to do some of the jobs at home, in the yard, around the apartment, wherever you happen to be. You also have the opportunity to instill life skills that will affect success in the workplace, success in the transition, because students may go on to further programs after they leave high school. They may not necessarily just go into work. Things like sitting in a chair. We know how important that is, because if you're sitting, you can focus on the person in front of you. If you're sitting, you can learn how to respond to what is being asked. If you're sitting, you can go a lot more places in life than if you don't know how to sit. So it's really important to think about, what are the basic skills that I have to ensure that I teach? Listen. We need to learn how to listen. We need to learn how to listen to conversations, and we also have to learn how not to listen to conversations, because in the workplace there's a lot of privacy. There's private phone calls, there's private conversation. So we have to also teach our sons or daughters or students when it is appropriate to move away from a conversation. Eye contact during a conversation. We know that some of our students with ASD don't do eye contact all that well, and that's okay. I had one young man who found it extremely difficult to look me in the eye and give me eye contact. So what we agreed upon was that he would give me a fleeting eye contact, because I explained to him that if you look at me, then I know that you're listening to me. So working with the student at the level the student is. We started that in grade 3. When he graduated, I could meet him and have a conversation with him, and he would sustain normal eye contact. So again, setting your priorities, knowing what's important. Joint attention. There are lots and lots of programs out now working on joint attention, because when we can join with another person and be able to focus on something together, then we have communication. And taking turns. They all seem very, very fundamental, and we know how hard it can be to try and get these skills across to the students and help them to master them. But it's not something that goes away when you're 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we've taught that, they know how to do it. You and I are still working on things like this. It takes a lifetime to become sophisticated in some of these areas, and so we must keep them in the forefront when we're working with our kids. Weight, very, very important one, especially when you're going out into a very busy world. And appropriate yes, no. Some of the motor skills that we need to look at. Crossing the midline. Does your student or child know how to cross the midline? Have you thought about how important crossing the midline is? Certainly, if you're going to be able to tie shoes, put dishes away, unload a dishwasher, even read is affected by your ability to cross the midline. Balance will influence a person's ability to participate. Coordination, organization. In other words, being able to organize your thoughts and actions and put them together. Being able to work left to right, top to bottom. If you're going to teach your son or your daughter or your student to do something as simple as wipe a table, well then start at the top on the left and work left to right, because you're teaching them a skill that will help with speed and accuracy in the workplace. If you're having them put groceries away, teach them to go left to right, top to bottom, even doing dishes, because what you're doing is you're increasing that ability to be able to have better organization, and it will influence a lot of other parts of their lives. Some of the social skills that we need to be aware of. And these don't just come from Vicki and I. These are things that we found in the Conference Board of Canada that influence an individual's ability to sustain and be maintained on the work site. Punctuality, very important. As I said, listening, not just listening to what someone is telling you, but also when to listen and when not to listen. It's really important to learn how to question. It's very important for us to teach our students or our children how to ask a question if they don't know what's going on. We need to be sure we understand what personal boundaries are. We need to make sure that our students know boundaries when it comes to not just personal space, but the boundaries that deal with vision boundaries. Should we be looking at this? Should we be involved in this? And we need to teach them what word boundaries are. There are programs out there, such as Circles program, which is often referred to as a social sexual training program. But I have found over the years that when I'm working with students who do not understand boundaries, that using a color-coded approach to teaching them about boundaries, you can get into a lot of different areas. It's, for those of you who may not know about the Circles program, and actually Vicki and I have developed a program that is in the book that we wrote as well, which is the Personal Peak Safety Program. And what we do is we talk about what your own personal space is, and we talk about how that relates to the individual. We often have them, if they're younger, lie on the floor and do an outline of their body so that they can see what their personal space looks like, who they are. And we teach them about personal space, and we teach them about who's allowed into personal spaces. And when we talk about the personal space that is right around them, we tell them that that is like a second skin, and nobody's allowed to be part of that personal space, because that's a violation of who you are as a human being. And then we talk about the next level of personal safety and personal space, where your family is allowed to be. And we talk about what types of things that you engage in with your family. You may give them big hugs, you may give them kisses, you may sit really close to them, and they are the ones who are there to protect you for life. They're the ones who make sure that when you're sick, they will take care of you. Then we move out of that personal safety boundary into the next level, which talks about who your best friends are and what kind of interactions you might have with them. And then the next level gets into the world of work and what's expected, what touch, what kind of words you would use, how you would dress when you go to the workplace. So it's worth taking a look at what personal safety skills and what community safety skills that your son or daughter already knows and needs to learn in order to be safe. We talk about conversation topics. We have a really good story about this one. I'll let Vicki tell you.
One of our students at the very beginning was set up with an employer, awesome employer, one that we had a lot of trust with, and one that we had connected with for a number of our students. And he phoned me one day and he says, Vicki, we have a problem. Of course, hairs go up on the back of my neck, what's happened? He said, do you talk about conversations in your class? Like what to talk about over lunchtime? And at that time we didn't. And I said, actually, we haven't done that yet. Why? And he said, well, our young lady today was telling everybody in the staff room that she was a virgin. And of course, my first response is, yes. My second response was, that's not appropriate in a staff room. So the very next class, we sat down and said, there are some things that you can talk about, and there are some things that you don't talk about in the staff room. There are other places to discuss that. And now we bring it up all the time. We'll start a conversation with a student, and the student will say, aren't we supposed to talk about that with somebody else? Yes. We will try them both ways. We'll teach them the right way, then we'll flip into something, and they'll say, you know what? I think I'm supposed to talk to my mom about that. Yes, you are. Good for you. So we're testing them all the time. But that's another example of where employers and the students help us to come up with the curriculum.
And again, you could go back to a visual diagram and you can go into conversations and you can color code them and say, these are very private conversations. Those are conversations that you only have with mom or dad or grandma or Auntie Sue or whomever. But when you're in the workplace, these are the topics that you can talk about and practice those. Practice those at home, practice those in the lunchroom at school, practice them in the hallways. Teach other students in school how to say, that's one of your personal topics. You need to talk to your mom about that, or you need to talk to your teacher about that. But be consciously aware that our students don't get this stuff symbiotically. They don't just through osmosis understand a lot of this. So we need to also train other people in the environment to be supportive and understand what the rules are and what they can do to help these students become more successful. We also teach them telephone skills, and that of course is becoming more complex because it used to be you just answered the phone and took a message and gave it to mom. So that in itself is becoming complex, but there are certain telephone skills that students can learn if they're going to be in charge of taking messages at the office or at the work of place, or if they have to phone an employer to say, I'm sorry, I'm sick today, I can't come in. So that's important. And again, Miles taught us this because his mom was telling me that the phone rang during dinner one night, and he said, I'll get it. So he got up and he answered the phone and he said, Miles? Yes, yes, okay, yeah, that would be good. Oh, I really like that, okay. And he sat down at the table and his mom said, so who was it? He said, I don't know. What did he have to say? I don't know. So we had to go through a whole training session with Miles, and of course then we realized that he wasn't the only one who was encountering some of these challenges and difficulties. Handshakes we take for granted. I know how to shake a hand, but do you know how to shake a hand in order to influence an employer so that he will think twice about whether or not he wants you on his staff? Because there is a proper way to shake hands. And that's it. Part of what Vicki does now in the course, because I'm not teaching the course anymore, I've moved on to other things. I just touch bases whenever I can when I'm in Campbell River. But part part of what Vicki does now is every time the students come into the classroom, at the beginning, they have to shake her hand, right?
They do. In fact, they don't even come into the classroom unless I'm there, ready to shake their hand. If I'm writing something on the board, they will wait at the door. At the beginning, this was very difficult for many of our kids having that personal contact, and it is a challenge for some of our students. But I'll tell you how fabulous it is. 2 quick stories. 2 of our students had graduated, and these are students that had gone through our program for a number of years, and they had graduated from the school system. A couple of summers ago, my husband and I were in the parking lot at Staples. One of the kids came racing up to say hi, started to chatter away to me. The other one was left out of the conversation, but went immediately over to my husband and said, "Hello, my name's Shalane," and put out her hand to shake my husband's hand. He was blown away. It was just amazing, the confidence that she came. Believe it or not, a handshake will give you confidence. It helps you introduce yourself to somebody else. Another example is people say, well, Vicki, they'll never learn a handshake. I had a student that was physically challenged, also mentally challenged, and she did regular shredding in my office. She would come into my office with 2 educational assistants once a week. She did this for a whole year. Every day she came in, I would shake her hand and say, "Hi, Melissa, great to see you." And I would have a wonderful conversation with her. And the EAs would say to me, "Vicki, you're always chattering with her. Why?" And I said, "Because I don't know what she thinks about what's happening here. I have no idea what's going on in her head." They used to laugh at me. When I left the room, I would always shake her hand and say, "Thank you very much. You've done an awesome job." Whether it was me leaving or she leaving first, it didn't matter. We always shook hands. One day, about 8 months into the process, I was leaving the room, but I had an armful of books and I couldn't shake her hand. I went past and I said, "Bye, Melissa, thank you a whole bunch for what you're doing." And with that, she put out her hand to shake my hand. Needless to say, I dropped my books. We all burst into tears and I shook hands. The handshake is something all the students can learn, will learn, and are very proud of. They're just right there, and when they shake a hand, it is a grab and a one shake down, but there's also the eye contact and the smile that goes with it. And it's amazing, the employers, what they say afterwards. They say, "Wow, they are really good at this. They know how to introduce themselves." It's very powerful.
We had another young man who went out one day and he came back to the class, and he had been for a job interview, and the kids wanted to know, "Did you get the job? Did you get the job?" And he turned around and he says, "Yes, because I shook his hand, I looked him in the eye, and I smiled." So, and you know, one of the things that we notice, because Vicki takes students out all the time, she doesn't just work with students who have challenges, she places every student in Campbell River, is that our students tend to know the drill quite well. In fact, maybe even a little better than some of the typical students that we would expect to know how to dress, how to approach an employer, how to talk to an employer. So the training and the slow progress that we see taking place, it really pays off for our students. We want them to learn how to take a message. We also want them to be socially aware. And there is so much to work on with our students when it comes to social awareness. Those of you who have been to many of the workshops that Deborah has organized with ACT have certainly proven that. So as parents, really, the more that you can do to be able to introduce social niceties and expectations to your son or daughter, the more that it will pay off. Because as Vicki said, you know, those who question what we were teaching the students, such as eye contact, such as shaking a hand, such as how to stand, how to look at a person, how to sit across from a person, we didn't necessarily do that on our own. We would invite other people to come into the classroom, and that's really important. Is if you're a parent and you have a grandmother who loves to serve tea, or you have a neighbor who likes to engage with you and your child, then invite them into your lives, because they are going to provide certain social skills that perhaps we wouldn't think about. So look around at your community and see who else can help increase those skills and abilities so that there's greater generalization in the future as well. Teaching our students, our children, body language, of course, is really important. In fact, as I was watching something on TV the other day, I thought, this is really a good example of pride of achievement and excitement and happiness, and I think we should be doing this with the next group that we're working with. Looking at the opportunities in your environment where you can really showcase what other people are thinking just through the way they're responding at events or in certain situations.
Do you realize that 7 to 11% of communication is spoken? That means that 89 to 93% of communication is body language. That's huge. We teach that through role play. We do role play all the time. And we get the students to role play, because in order to learn it, they have to experience it. So they will either pick the role play, we will pick the role play, we ask for volunteers, and they are role playing on a regular basis. Sometimes they'll role play the negative, and then they'll role play the positive, and the group gives their reflection on that as well.
And part of the course, as I was beginning to talk about, was also inviting other professionals from the school board or from the school or even from the community to come in, because then they project the body language that they have in their particular profession. We've had RCMP officers come in, and right away, like, the whole body language is completely different. And some of the students are really quite timid and quite afraid of the police officer because of the experiences that they may or may not have had. And so having the RCMP officer come in and role play with Vicki, they were able to see, they were able to get an exposure, and that's what a lot of this is about, exposing them to situations so that they're not taken off guard when they meet them in the real world, so that they have an idea of how to respond. We've had speech and language therapists come in and teach the kids how to talk to each other. They sit knee to knee and they show them how to hold their shoulders, how to hold their head, whether they cross their legs or not. We've had psychologists come in and talk about different emotions, talk about anger management, and get the kids to role play. And for those students who are verbal, we talk about it, but we always, always, always use visual supports, because we don't know what their level of understanding of the different concepts we're teaching are to them. So it's really important whenever you're teaching, if you can demonstrate through role play, or you can have drawings, or you can show videos, if you can back up what you're talking about with some real demonstration or some visual supports, then the students have a better chance of being able to understand what we are talking about. We also teach emotions. I was working with a group of elementary students at one point and realized that they weren't reading the emotions, and happy and mad might be as much as they got. And as I became more and more vested in trying to teach the students how to read emotions, I began to realize also that mad is such a generic word that it's one that I try to avoid altogether. Usually if you're upset or angry, there's a different connotation. You could be frustrated, you could be having experienced a loss. So we try to expand the vocabulary so that they began to be able to say, I'm frustrated, I don't like that, I'm upset, or my dog died, I'm sad. We used a lot of pictures. We had about 10 children in this particular group, and what we did was we took pictures of the children in the different states. And then we would do things like play charades, and they'd have to guess what the emotion was that the student was exhibiting. But they'd had some exposure and been able to connect the emotion to the body language that the student was projecting.
They not only have to be able to demonstrate what they are trying to say with body language, they have to be very much aware of what another person is saying through body language. So they have to read body language as well.
So we would also invite anybody, actually, because this was being held at the board office, who happened to be walking by to join our group. And we would sometimes just ask them to participate in some of the activities we were doing, including the superintendent. And they were all really good about it. And they would come in and we'd say, show us a mad face. Show us what you look like when you're angry or you're upset or you're frustrated. Secretary might walk by and we would invite her in. And the kids began to realize that they really had to get to know people to be able to read their specific emotions. And using pictures in the photograph book are great, but remember, most photographs are us smiling. So we need to teach them the different levels of emotions. And another project that we had with the students was we developed booklets on what happy meant to them and what people in their environment looked like when they were happy. So we gave some of the students cameras, and they went out and they took a picture of mom when she was happy. They took a picture of dad when he was happy, the teacher when they were happy. And then we did a book about frustration, and we got them to start to recognize that, you know, if the teacher was doing this, she wasn't mad, she was thinking. Because if you're only reading one or two emotions, then you're not going to have all the information you need to be able to relate appropriately. One other student taught us this, in that he was coming to school and he seemed to be in a really, really good mood. And then when he and his educational assistant or paraprofessional would debrief for the day what was going to go on, they would use their emotions thermometer that Tony Atwood talks about. And when the educational assistant would ask him what he felt like, for about 3 days in a row, he was putting angry. And finally, on the third day, she said, but you come in, you're happy, your mom has said that you've had a good weekend, you had a good night, and yet you keep telling me that you're upset. Why is that? And he says, well, because you are. And she said, what do you mean? He says, well, you're upset, so I'm upset. You see, she had to figure out how to get her car fixed, and she didn't know how she was going to juggle it, and it was a major repair that had to be done. So she'd be thinking about it when she wasn't teaching. It was starting to take up a lot of her time. And when you think about the child with autism spectrum disorder, you know, if the world is mostly about me because I am unable to relate to the rest of the world like everybody else, then if you're upset, I must be the reason. So he did not understand that she had separate feelings, separate thoughts that she was dealing with. He thought that anything that she was reacting to, she had to be reacting to him. So after that, we started putting up 2 emotion thermometers, one of how the educational assistant was feeling and one of how he was feeling, so that he began to understand that separateness of emotions. And that was a real eye-opener for me, so that then we could expand it a little bit to what the teacher might be feeling, what a friend might be feeling, and even if we were debriefing in a conflict situation, we could say, this is the way that person is feeling. Personal care is huge, and you know, teachers and parents really have to work together, because we've run into a few situations where, because of the sensitivity to water or perfumes in the soap or the feeling of the different textures involved in bathing, Students have not, we've had 3 students where it's been really, really hard by the time we get them in high school to get them to understand how important it is for them to take care of their personal hygiene. The earlier we address this, the better, because the reality is you do have to learn how to have clean clothes, use deodorant, have showers regularly, particularly when you're going through the teenage stage. Keep your hair washed and combed and kept appropriately, because it makes a difference. If you're going to be in an environment where there are a lot of people around you, you have to be presentable. You have to be able to stand beside someone and them not want to move far away from you, because that will make or break your ability to stay on the work site. Again, in the classroom, that is something that we do. We work with parents. In some districts, we have swim programs, and we use those swim programs for more than just occupational therapy. We use them in order to teach students social skills, but we also teach them proper ways of showering in a different venue. Because even though you're doing it at home, it may not be transferring to different environments. So working together with support groups and respite homes and the parents, grandparents, whomever is involved in the student's life, it's really important for everybody to be on the same page and recognize how important hygiene is, and nutrition. We also invite one of the local dental hygienists in, and they're amazing people. They are amazing because they don't just come in and tell students how to brush their teeth. They come in and they talk about why they have bad breath and how eating junk food will affect their appearance and affect their teeth. And so it becomes a really holistic approach to being able to reinforce values that may be that parents may be running into difficulty with at home.
The only comment I would make here is that we, with our program, actually have a public health nurse come into our course. She will stand up at the front of the room and demonstrate, with all her clothes on, how to take a shower, and she's in pretty good detail. It's amazing. The kids watch and think, oh my gosh, never thought I should do that. But we also have clothing for our students. If we have a student that we really would like to go out in a work experience and does not have clothing that would be appropriate, we will actually supply them with some clothing. We have odds and sods from the lost and found. You have to be creative. And I had sons, I can bring them in. I have clothes, I can bring them in. If we have a student that doesn't have appropriate clothing, and at this point I'm basically talking clean clothing, we will bring it in. And it's amazing, once they've had their shower and they put on some clean clothing, they're feeling pretty pumped. That in itself is a learning experience for those kids. They will feel a lot better, and they want to do that on a regular basis. So that in itself becomes a teaching tool.
So when we bring it back to the role of the parents, again, being really conscious of making sure that your son or daughter is aware that, yes, I'm going out to play baseball, I'm wearing my jeans. But today we're going to this special theater production or special event at the church. This is when I dress up in these clothes. I might be going to a wedding, or I might be going to a birthday party. This is when I put on these clothes, so that they begin to see the differences of how they would dress in different environments, so that when they go for a job interview, as one of our girls showed up in her prom dress. And it was, I mean, it took us aback and taught us we had to teach kids how to dress appropriately for different types of events. And she had a gorgeous dress, but it was certainly not appropriate for going for an interview with an employer. So when we're working at home, there's lots of jobs that kids can do. And again, being conscious that every person in the house has responsibilities, and the more that we share the responsibilities, the easier it is on everybody in the family. Taking out the garbage. So we look at what's involved in taking out the garbage. We have to teach the student or the child to be responsible, how to motivate themselves so that we don't nag them, create and execute routines, and perform those repetitive tasks regularly. And it increases the independence that we would like to see, because you know, every chore that has to be done at home, if we have a vision of our sons and daughters being independent in the future, we need to make sure that the jobs don't have to be done by someone else. The more that they can do independently, the less care they will need by caregivers. So things as simple as brushing teeth and making sure that the toothpaste cap is put back on, putting the dishes away, washing the dishes, setting the table, all of these will eventually increase the amount of independence that this individual may have.
And increases their confidence when we ask them to do similar chores at school.
So we just want you to take a minute and turn to somebody beside you and think about a job that your child or your student does or can do at home. And then think about the skills that are involved in that job. Think about how complex it might be or how easy it might be. And we're not just talking about the motor skills, although they're usually involved. We're also thinking about like what part of time management and responsibility are you increasing when you have your son or daughter or your student perform these activities at home. Okay, so if you just take a couple of minutes and talk to each other.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody who wants to share one of the jobs that they are either having their child do or will now plan to have their child do?
There is a mic up on the side if you would like to share. That's all right, you were sharing very well with each other, which is good.
So I think because of all the communication that was taking place, it was pretty obvious that things that we have to do around the home, around the yard, wherever we happen to live, there's always something that we can have our son or daughter thinking about very seriously being engaged in, because the spin-offs are incredible. And it makes us feel like we are teaching, the individuals begin to feel like they really have something to do. And that's what we want. Again, we want all students to be able to have some place to go, something to do, and people to meet, right? So when we are having all of our kids, when we're talking about the jobs, the responsibilities, the roles, we're not just concentrating on one part of the population with whom we are dealing in ASD. We're talking about all students, regardless of their cognitive level or anything else, because every child, every student who comes into our program, be it whether they are very challenged and perhaps even physically involved, or whether they happen to be going to college or to university, we have students recognize that these skills need to be learned by everybody if they want to be successful in their community. Okay, we have a little video of Graham, and Graham is the young man that I met downtown and was grumbling about the job he had to do, and after I engaged with him, he was motivated again. He's also the young man who could not give eye contact when I first started working with him when he was in grade 2. And as we expected him to give us more and more sustained eye contact, he learned to do it very, very well. So we're going to end this segment of the morning with a little caption that was put together by Graham and his fellow students, as well as one of our paraprofessionals who's really bought into this whole idea of recording the journey. You know, when I started this quite a few years ago, I honestly didn't see Graham being able to catch a bus independently, show up for a job, do the job without prompting, and get paid, and then go and do what he wanted to do.
He's amazing. That's all I can say. This young man has done a dozen work experiences and blew every employer out of the water. Did he have some bumps in the road? You bet. But we learned from those bumps, and that's what it's all about.